Hello, I'm Dr. Mercurial Arborea. Tell you what, if you guys can tell me what movie that's from, maybe I'll give you some bonus points this week. This is Safety 380, Introduction to Occupational Safety and Health. Lecture 17, we're going to talk about ergonomics and things that go along with ergonomics. I have a lot of pictures to show in this one. I think what I really want to point out is we've got 3 chapters to read, and I read them real quick. They're a quick read. They really are. Chapter 16 in Administration and Programs talks about the fundamentals of ergonomics and more applied to the prevention of cumulative trauma disorders, or CTDs. We really don't use that term anymore. They need to update that chapter. We call them work-related musculoskeletal disorders. That's what we call them. I like to call them overexertion injuries because I think it encompasses more what's really going on. So breeze through that. I'll have some questions on the study sheet to guide, some of the highlights. What's interesting is that chapter ends discussing disability, which is a potential outcome of a musculoskeletal disorder, a permanent variety. And then chapter 23 gets into disability. And my first semester in grad school, I took a course on designing for disabilities, and it really opened my eyes to, it opened my eyes to this whole nother world of design and adaptability. But what was really interesting is what ergonomics is the design to fit the work to the worker. I had to make sure I got that right. This in designing for disabilities is kind of the same thing. It's just you just make sure you define what those limitations are. All right. Well, I'm going to talk about it from all different angles. Chapter 15 talks about fork trucks or forklifts. That alone is a lecture in the next level of this course. I just want you to be familiar with issues in regards to material handling. So more of a warehouse application of forklifts, more than anything. So you don't have to go overboard on that. Again, I'll try and guide you through the study sheet. And I got some really cool, not really cool, funny, I think they're funny YouTube videos to watch, and then some other things I want you to take a look at. So this is meant to be sort of getting more into the application, because we covered the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the previous module, and we saw what was the primary cause of non-fatal injury and illness in the workplace. And I've got it on the screen. We covered this chart in that lecture. And what's interesting is from 2014 to 2018, I think that overexertion has had the greatest decline. Like a 5 per 10,000 full-time workers has gone down. I don't see that level of decline in any of the other top 5 here, but it's still number 1. And so there's still work to be done. Let's go to the next slide. Over on the left, that is if you remember going to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, on the main page, they kind of give you a summary. And I kind of pointed out some of the numbers. So these are 2019. The 2019 charts have not been created yet. We're still in sort of that in-between. But if you read any articles on the cost of injuries, you tend to see those articles reference Liberty Mutual's research. And the most recent I could find was the index of 2020. And over on the right, they estimate, and I believe they use some institutes' injury data, but first they prioritize it based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics data. They've got the top 10. So what I did is I put red circles around the ones that are more related to musculoskeletal disorders. Number 1, overexertion. Look how much it is. It's out of the overall, I believe, close to $60 billion a year the companies expend due to disabling workplace injuries. Overexertion is 23.5%, a dominant amount. Number 5 and number 8 are also under that category. So combined, that's a big chunk of change. The next page from that report just kind of gets into the top 5, and obviously we've got the top 2 right here. And looking at it, out of the top 5, it's somewhere around like 31.4% or 18.67. So a lot. So it is a concern. as a cause of disabling workplace injuries. It's so redesigning the work, and possibly improving the fitness of the workers that have to do more physical type work is really a two-pronged approach here. So when we think of an overexertion injury, back injury, it's a common thing. Not common, it's a regular thing. What is it? And usually back injuries are the result of one instance. Sure, you may get a sore back, and actually fatigue and soreness are predictors of injury, especially disabling injury, but it's usually a particular lift or an effort that, whether it's forceful, whether it's awkward or something like that boom, the pain, you're like, oh, I am hurt, right? And it can be muscular, it can be tendon, it can be ligament, bursa, sort of the spongy material in between the bones. All that can be somehow injured, punctured, strained, teared, doing a lift that your body is not capable of. And then on the bottom here, it shows the strain that can be on the back, based on how you are oriented to the object you're lifting. Actually, I've spoken to some people who work as physical and occupational therapists, and it seems that back injuries were for a long time the number one, but now what's creeping up and being a big concern are rotator cuff injuries. So that's shoulder-related injuries. Specifically, I shouldn't say specifically, because I think the last time I spoke to a nurse, she said that age is an issue, but they're seeing it in all age groups. And so just looking at the screen here, and you've probably already read it, as far as upper limb musculoskeletal disorders, you see they've got the work factor and the disorder. So rotator cuff is right there on the top, and then there are other ones. Sometimes it's nerve impingement, and there's a few here like carpal tunnel syndrome. You don't have to memorize those. You just need to know that musculoskeletal issues can be almost anywhere on the body. We're getting to the definition now, and that is it's fitting the work to the worker. And I know they're over on the right. I've got some interesting other definitions that seem to fit. But for the class, let's talk about it from the perspective of designing the work so that it doesn't exceed the limitations of the worker. That sounds really good. I just made it up off the top of my head. So you see there's different things we can look for, different risk factors. There are a multitude of different work assessments. And if you're in the safety program here, you are required to take an ergonomics focused class, and there are sometimes electives designed around that basic concept. And there's like RULA, RUBA, or is it REBA? There's all kinds of different approaches they use for evaluating what is the primary risk of a musculoskeletal injury. And then NIOSH has this lifting guide. Some people use it. If you, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't use it because it really only encompasses a two-dimensional lift, and I don't know. So if I have to solve a lifting issue for a cartoon character, okay, but for humans, I don't find a lot of value in it. I more or less look at how the person is feeling about it. I like to redesign the work itself. Based on the factors you'd find on the lifting guide. Heat, cold, and vibration have also been shown to either cause or exacerbate musculoskeletal issues. The VDT, you're going to read about that in the book. We really don't talk about that stuff as much anymore. Setting up a workstation is actually fairly easy, fairly straightforward, and I think I've got a picture here coming up. One really important aspect of ergonomics or the treatment of overexertion injuries is medical management, making sure that the person is given time. And sometimes you can think of a worker as almost like an athlete, that they now have more active recovery methods, and it's meant to not only heal but to strengthen. And for positions that require more laborious, material moving type work, an employer would be intelligent to try and make the worker increase their fitness and strength levels so that they are well above the threshold for injury. Interesting. The red line on the bottom. Please know this. There is no ergonomic standard from OSHA. If OSHA establishes that a worker is being exposed to something that is likely to cause harm or serious injury, the general duty clause, that's what the GDC stands for, they will cite the general duty clause. But there is no ergonomic standard, which is, there was one, I should back up. There was one right at the end of Bill Clinton's administration. They pushed one through, but then his predecessor, George Bush, repealed it, I think, by March. So I think it was only a thing for like 2 or 3 months, but yeah, they tried. Personal opinion, I was against it. It was too restrictive and really didn't have enough science behind it, but that's just my feeling towards it. How would you like to have an office set up like the dude on the right? Looks awesome, doesn't it? That's like $1 million gamers system right there. But most of us don't. Most of us just have a card table, a folding chair, and our computer. But there are things we can do to adjust chairs. There are things we can do with the height and orientation of our workspace to limit awkward postures, to limit reaching, to limit contact stress. All these things over time, and I could refer to the cumulative trauma disorder, over time, the accumulation of the stress strain can cause an injury, a disorder, which needs to be treated. When I worked for the state, I was considered the ergonomics guy. I was at a party once. They're like, "You're the ergonomics guy." I'm not kidding. That happened more than once. It wasn't even my party. It was my wife's work party. I would go in and people would sign up, and I did probably 300-400 of these during my 6.5 years. And I would ask them to fill out a symptom survey, and then I'd have them explain to me what they do, and then I would stand back and I'd let them just work, and I would observe their the sort of the frame of their body, their orientation to their work, and watch them do things. And 99.9% of the time, I could pinpoint what was causing their symptoms, and then I would do adjustments. Really fun. And then you see what you do. What you're trying to do is put people in a neutral posture. That's not end all be all, but because people during the day people move about. I used to always say fidgeters never have any problems working at a workstation because they don't sit still, so they don't have the normal awkward postures, stress, strain, contact stress. And then always reevaluate for effectiveness and repeat. And I think I would follow up on people. I want to say I would. There's been studies, not recent ones, they're a little bit older now, about the how unhealthy it is to be sitting all day. That as humans, we weren't designed to be sitting in a chair all day, even if it's adjusted properly. But adjusting it properly is at least going to do something. And indeed, these chairs, what they have these days, they're great. They allow somebody's back to breathe because they're mesh. They've got the lumbar support. They've got the adjustable armrests so that the shoulders don't always have to be doing all the work. They now have neck supports as well. For the pandemic, I went and got a really good one for my wife to adjust to her because she was complaining about back and shoulder issues. So you see, it works. So here's a picture I talked about. This is all rule of thumb, VTD, which is Video Display Terminal, ergonomic stuff. Super old. Again, when I did my work, I would watch people and listen to them, and then I help them out. But interestingly enough, they have redesigned workstation, like the tool you see here. Instead of a wrist that is awkward and possibly pinching here, you can keep your wrist straight, more in a neutral position. I'm trying to see if you can see me, and then you can just do the squeeze. So they've redesigned tools to reduce the strain on hands, wrists, and forearms. And also then that tends to help out shoulder as well. You can see the picture on the bottom, the person's at an assembly, and instead of having to pick up a screwdriver and crank, it's either pneumatic or electrical, and they're usually on a tether that is counterweighted. So there's almost no weight. So it's better. And then proper lifting is a thing. You want to keep your back straight because you don't want to put extra weight or stress on the L5-S1 vertebra. And then the workstations, like you can tilt them now and move them around and raise the height, and it's all really good. What's interesting, this is all new to this lecture because this is new within the last couple of years, is that companies are now exploring and experimenting with wearable technologies. Solar Analytics is actually being tested right now in Wisconsin with the Department of Administration. My friend Jake Lowell is doing a study with the Veterans Hospital with it. That the workers wear this and it kind of tracks their movements and their angles of where they are, and it helps you then have a data set that helps you identify where you should be focusing, what is most likely to cause harm for workers. Pretty cool stuff. And there are some competing ones as well. I think the one on the right is from Australia. I'm not backing anyone, it's just that's what I know. One big question: do back belts protect from injury? Back in the early 90s, there was a professor in California, I think his name was Jess Krause. I'm not sure though, Jesse Krause. And he had said, yes, I've got proof. He did a study at Home Depot, a bunch of Home Depots. I went to an ergonomics conference, and this is when I was still the compliance officer. I didn't even think about grad school yet. It was discussion I'm about to tell to you that kind of made me think about it. I sat at a table with a bunch of faculty from all over the U.S. I was 22, 23, 24, and I was listening to them talk, and I asked them about this study, and they started laughing like, that guy, he did it for the money. I'm like, what? So I got some insider information. I was like, I want to be like these people. I still want to be like those people. Pay me enough and I'll say it works. No, I'm just kidding. I would never do that. I've got ethics. Essentially, back belts do not help. The principle is by cinching up the midsection, what you're doing is you're displacing what would be focused stress or strain on the spine, and it's supposed to be distributed more throughout the abdomen, the cross-sectional area of the abdomen. But what that also does is it increases the intra-abdominal pressure, which affects blood pressure. And so if you have a pre-existing condition, it can make it worse. Really, if anything, it's meant just to kind of make sure you keep your back straight. They think it's better for a reminder than anything. So does it alone, it's not shown to provide any sort of exceptional support. It can actually cause problems depending on who the user is. People in the weight room still use them, to try to keep things together. That's fine, but it's more or less to protect the user maybe while doing squats from maybe a hernia versus actually protecting their back. That's all I'm going to say about that. Material handling and training are important, and you're not training people I'm going to train you to be safe so you don't get hurt. You got to design. Training is supplemental. I've got a few jobs over here that tend to lead the way when it comes to material handling injuries. We have warehouse worker, we've got beverage delivery, and we have healthcare workers who have to handle patients. What they're trying to do is not only redesign the environments, but also provide technology and tools to limit what was typically stressors, where they had to do a lot of heavy carrying, awkward, really bad hand coupling, which can be an issue, to help out. And I've got a few things listed here, but nothing trumps the design. And you got to make sure the technology works in all situations. You got to make sure the technology is functional, that it's adaptable, and the workers want to use it. Because if you don't have those things, you just spent a lot of money on something that's going to sit in the corner and collect dust. And then finally, making sure the person has proper fitness and stretching is always good as well. Here's some examples of different material handling improvement technologies. You can see them all here. And I seem to see more and more whenever I get my monthly magazines. The two standards you want to refer to, if this is going to be something you're going to do, they're right next to each other, 1910, 176, and 178. What's interesting is since the 90s in healthcare, they've had these lifts, but it's not always comfortable for the patient. Some patients can't fit into the slings that they put them in. They're not always available. They're not always charged. And so there are some issues. So I found there are some positives with the right environmental design. More interestingly, and I actually have a graduate student who's studying this at her workplace because she did a paper in one of my classes with the use of exoskeletons and extending tools, which means people don't have to work at height. And they've got something that takes most of the weight above their shoulders. And so car manufacturers, looks like here construction as well, they're finding ways to protect their workers' musculoskeletal fitness, which I think is fantastic. I think this stuff is really cool. They're expensive because they're new, but over time, I think they may become even more prevalent. You guys have heard of Amazon? Well, they have state of the art technology in their warehouses, and there's all these robots beep boop bopping around, and some I think there's still a lot of human interaction with it, but I don't think they're that far off. Just looking online, look up here on the right, a robot that completely loads a semi. That's a tough job. And that's an amazing thing. We've got, and then we got the delivery person down below doing the standard. I got boxes. I got to pick it up, got to bring it up. They're looking at drones. They're looking at these little vehicles to drive things around. So I'm really excited and interested in the use of different technologies, whether it's exoskeleton robots, different forms of delivery to try and reduce the musculoskeletal disorders in our workers. And I mean, we've already seen a decent decline, and I wonder how much may have been contributed by what we're kind of seeing now and what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that's pretty awesome. So this is a cool topic, obviously. So I want you to basically understand the overall impact of musculoskeletal disorders in the workplace, what some of the injuries are. I kind of covered those. The book will actually supplement things I had talked about here. I kind of talk more from an application and experience. The book gets into the nuts and bolts. I do want you to, you can go ahead and research and read about it, but back pelts do not prevent back injury like people thought they did. It may be an element of something else, but still, you can still strain yourself really bad by wearing one. It's not classified as PPE. Even though I think some workplaces do require it, the research says other. And I think you could also look that up in NIOSH. I'm going to shut up now. So take a look at the readings. Take a look at the videos, too. I show some people doing things they shouldn't do. And catch you on the flippity.